Today we have a really special session run by Sister Maureen Tinkler, who will be talking us through a Vincentian reflection and drawing on inspiration from St. Vincent as to how he supported people in need during times of crisis. Most of you probably know Sister Maureen, but for those of you who don't, Sister Maureen has served as a daughter of charity for over 50 years now, which is amazing. And she is our values coordinator at Daughters of Charity Services. So without further ado, Sister Maureen, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and a happy feast of St. Vincent de Paul. And may I watch each of you who's watching a joy-filled celebration and every blessing on this special day. Okay, I'm just going to screen share my presentation with you now. Okay. Can you all see? Okay. So these are just some thoughts that I've put together, and I've entitled the reflection "From Crisis to Crisis and How Vincentian Values Sustain Us." So if we look at the first slide, there we are. We see that in recent years, the world has been in a state of flux and crisis. Here in Great Britain, we've lived through the UK European membership referendum. That was on the 23rd of June in 2016. Then Brexit finally happened on the 1st of January 2020. And from that crisis, we moved into COVID-19 in April 2020. And now here we are, September 2022, in the midst of a global recession, with our cost of living rising 10% higher than it was this time last year. Next month, our energy bills are set to rise by 80% for dual fuel consumption, an increase equivalent to £700 a year for typical levels of family usage. So from Brexit to COVID to global recession, it's as if we're moving from crisis to crisis, out of the frying pan and into the fire. So if we just take a moment to think back from the referendum in 2016 until Brexit in 2020, where were you? What were you doing? Remember all the political toing and froing with the European Union. The change of prime ministers from David Cameron to Theresa May to Boris Johnson. And then when we thought everything had settled down a little, along came COVID. You know, there was a smashing cartoon in one of the broadsheets, and it was an old man who'd been watching his TV with his wife through all the Brexit stuff, and it was Brexit, 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 Brexit. And then suddenly we had COVID, and he says, "Thank God for COVID. At least it's a change from Brexit." So here we are. We remember all the masks, the hand washing, the social distancing, sadly, the fatalities, and then the great relief when the vaccines arrived. And now, with COVID under better control, the world has entered a global recession. And here they are, all the countries of the world, the International Monetary Fund showing that the world is really in a big global recession. We have all the cost of living rises. We all know it. We know how our food bills are going up. traveling back to London the other day, we filled up the petrol in the car, heck, and it was a fortune. Yeah, we know all of this. The cost of living is hitting our wallets, our pockets. The food prices, the bills. The petrol. Fuel. And then all of this has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. And as a Vincentian family, you know, we're very much caught up in the struggles in Ukraine. DePaul, Kharkiv, the daughters, the Vincentians, the Society of St. Vincent, the AIC, we're all very much caught up in what's happening there and all the suffering that accompanies war, especially for the poorest. And if that wasn't bad enough, with all the saber rattling between China and Taiwan, with the USA stepping in to ward off any aggression. And here is beloved Africa with so much unrest, political tension and violence. We think of our own Vincentian family in Nigeria and Ethiopia and Eritrea and the terrible suffering in Tigray. And although not on our TV screens each night, there is the never-ending conflict between Israel and Palestine. With all this war and poverty, the world is awash with asylum seekers, and our own government shamelessly spending thousands to try and deport them to Rwanda. Added to this mix is the current instability of our government. We've even had a change of monarch. And yet history and our own experience tell us that we shouldn't get too alarmed. And I like this quote from John Piper. He says, "Don't be surprised. There's nothing new under the sun, only endless repackagings." And it was the same in 17th century France. It was the same for Vincent and Louise and the first members of our Vincentian family. In Vincent's time, people died in great numbers of cholera, smallpox, typhoid, typhus, dysentery, and tuberculosis. And also a third of the population died of bubonic plague between 1600 and 1670. The death rate of the poor was 3 times that of the rich. And about every 12 years in France, there were bad harvests, leading to malnutrition, poverty, and loss of livelihood. And when people have no work, no income, they are left to become beggars. And Paris was awash with literally thousands of people unable to cope with life. And during Vincent's lifetime, France was constantly at war and experienced the misery and hardship brought about the Fronde, which was the Civil War, and the 30 Years' War, which was happening across Europe. Literally thousands languished in prison, and many of the prisoners were taken and put to work on the galley ships, on the King's fleet. And we know that Vincent had a great love for these prisoners and did his best to ameliorate their conditions. And also when you've got war going on, soldiers around, lots of instability in the country, there were many, many, many abandoned babies and children. The same was true. Many suffered, the elderly, disabled people, refugees, the countless number who were ill-fed and hungry, the sick and the injured. And we know that at one point in the Duchy of Lorraine, Vincent was working with refugees in 28 towns in that place alone. And Vincent was very much caught up in the politics of the day. Vincent knew both of these men, Cardinal Richelieu on the left and Cardinal Mazarin on the right. And many, many, many times he went to court and pleaded for the plight of the poor, begging them to have peace, begging for justice. And, you know, he did his best with those in power. So Vincent and Louise had the pressure of poverty knocking at their door. There was never enough money, never enough food, never enough nursing care, never enough shelter, never enough work and employment, never enough justice, never enough peace. And Vincent, you know, at many times when he looked at all the poverty and all the suffering around him, he would say to those people, "Your pain is my pain." So we look at the lady here in the cartoon. How often did Vincent feel like this? She says, "I'm not sure how long I can cope with this." How often did Vincent and Louise and our first Vincentians feel like that? So how did Vincent and Louise cope? And myself, I think they coped because they were people who reflected on the life of Jesus. They were people of prayer. And their attitudes, their actions, their behaviors and decisions were underpinned by gospel values. And here's Vincent in his quote: "We should strive to keep our hearts open to the sufferings and wretchedness of other people, and pray continually that God may grant us that spirit of compassion, which is truly the Spirit of God." So in a nutshell, Vincent's faith and his values sustained him. And we all know the core values by heart. I have the little card on my desk. It looks at me every day. And the values say that we should be serving people who are experiencing the effects of poverty. We should be respecting each person's dignity. We should be compassionate and kind. We should be enabling choice and change. We should be acting in solidarity for justice. But there are two values that were very close to Vincent and Louise's heart. We don't talk about them so much in the wider family, but they are trust in divine providence. Sorry, I put the slide up. And it's interesting, you know, there's a famous story about the lady who wants to win the national lottery. And she prays to God, "Oh God, let me win the lottery. Please let me win the lottery. Lord, I need money. Let me win the lottery. Let me win the lottery." And God replies to the lady, "Do me a favor and buy a ticket, buy a lottery ticket." So it's the same for us. We have to do the best that we can, and then we have to leave it all in God's hands. You know, faith is not hoping God can. it is knowing that God will. So we have to do the best we can, and then we have to trust that the Lord will be with us in all that we're trying to do for others. And another value that is, we've maybe heard it many times, but Vincent had this great quote, and he says, "Love is inventive, even to infinity." So what Vincent is saying to each of us is that we know our goal, we know what we're trying to do, we know how we're trying to work with others to help them alleviate their needs or to reach their full potential. And there are many ways of doing that. So Vincent's saying to each of us, try and be as creative as possible. Try new ways, try different ways, try every way. Collaborate with whoever you can in order to reach the goal that you want to achieve. And I think we all know the classic example of Vincent. He had all these foundling babies who grew up to be foundling children, and they all needed accommodation. He had all the refugees that he was trying to support, and he was always short of money. So we know that the king gave Vincent about £1.5 million in today's money to help. And Vincent, what he did is, he didn't give the money straight away to the refugees. He built 13 houses for the foundling children, and then he charged the ladies of charity quite a high rent, and all the rents he collected from these houses he used to look after the refugees. So Vincent himself was really, really creative in trying to work with people and alleviate poverty. So here's a little quote. It's not Vincent, it's actually St. Louise to one of our sisters in 1658. She says this: "Do not be upset if things are not as you would want them to be for a long time to come. Do the best that you can. Do it very peacefully and calmly, and allow room for the guidance of God in your lives. And then do not worry about the rest." Okay, I'm going to finish by playing a song, and it's by the group Gen Verdi. Gen Verdi began in 1966 in Florence. It consists of 19 artists from 14 different countries. And Jean Verdi's goal is to build bridges, not walls, to have dialogue, not intolerance. They've released 70 albums in 9 languages, and they have 147 band members. So I'm going to play their song now, and it's called "You Did It to Me," about Vincent de Paul. See if I can get it in another way.
I see a wounded traveler, left with only shattered dreams, lying on the roadside, calling quietly to me. I look beyond the surface, Lord, I catch a glimpse of you, all alone and helpless. Tell me, Lord, what would you do? I'll be your hands, I'll be your smile, 'cause you'll be with me all the while. I know you need me here today, Lord, I'll keep searching for your face. I can see you now, I can be you now. I want to bring your love again. Prisoners of hunger, cold and pain, children of every creed and race. How could I ever walk away? our ears and eyes, so to love more deeply, and like you to give our lives. May we bring your spirit, may your people come alive as we walk together. Come and set our hearts on fire. Amar a todos, amarlos con tu corazón. We'll be your heart, we'll be your song. Seremos eco de tu voz, so let the whole world sing along. Busco tu rostro en torno a mí, en los que no sienten tu amor. Yo te puedo ver, yo en ti puedo ser, amor que hace renacer. Hambre y dolor son su prisión, su hogar la desesperación. En ellos tú me necesitas, en ellos yo te encuentro. I know you need me here today. You did it to me, you did it to me. I can see it now, I can feel it now. You did it to me, you did it to me. I know you need me here today. Lord, I'll keep searching for your face. How could I ever walk away? 'Cause I can hear you say, you did it to me, you did it to me, you did it to me, to me. Me lo haces a mí. You did it to me, you did it to me, you did it to me, to me.
So I'll just put the last slide there. There we go. So that's the end of the reflection for today. So happy feast to everyone in the family and beyond. Have a really good day. Have a very, very blessed day. And thank you.